No sé qué piensen, pero yo creo que entonces, Marce, arrancamos para irle dando entrada a la gente que se está conectando. Porque
Sí,
nos...
por favor, ya tenemos 24 espectadores. Buenos días. Entonces, podemos iniciar.
Buenos días. Buenos días.
Hola, Marce.
Estamos ya al aire. ¿Puedo ir dando las recomendaciones?
No, creo que no. Ya tenemos las personas conectadas.
Sí, hay 24
Sí,
personas.
así es. Hay 24 personas ya de espectadores.
Ok. O sea, no están ya están aquí en la sesión.
Sí, señora.
Ok, bueno, entonces ya podemos ir empezando, Marce.
Hola, buenos días. Antes de iniciar, agradezco que las personas que requieran acceder a la traducción simultánea, teniendo en cuenta que en el desarrollo del evento tendremos una intervención en inglés, seleccionen en la barra inferior de Zoom, en el icono de interpretación, el idioma en el que desean escuchar el evento. Podrán hacerlo en español, en inglés o en el idioma original en el que se den las intervenciones. Las personas que están conectadas por YouTube pueden activar los subtítulos. Muchas gracias. Bienvenidos y muchas gracias por estar con nosotros en el conversatorio Tigo Transformación Digital en los medios de comunicación a nivel global, una iniciativa de Tigo Colombia organizada por Foros. Saludo a los periodistas que nos acompañan y a la audiencia que nos sigue a través de la transmisión en Facebook y el canal de YouTube de quienique.com, medio aliado de Foros. Saludo a los periodistas que nos acompañan y a la audiencia que nos sigue a través de la transmisión en Facebook y el canal de YouTube de quienique.com, medio aliado de Foros. Con el hashtag Transformación Digital Tigo, ustedes pueden empezar a compartir desde ya el desarrollo de este evento también a través de las páginas de Facebook de Sala de Prensa Tigo, Foros y quienique.com. Podrán seguir la transmisión y, por supuesto, hacer preguntas a nuestro invitado central, las cuales serán resueltas al cierre del evento. Inicia unas tendencias para el quehacer periodístico y los generadores de contenido. Es así como los medios de comunicación se preparan para enfrentarse a nuevos retos. Este encuentro busca visibilizar cómo la inmersión de estas nuevas tecnologías y la era digital están transformando la industria de los medios de comunicación y el periodismo en el mundo, desde varios frentes. La manera como se deben generar los contenidos, abordar a los personajes, cubrir los hechos y contar las historias para iniciar con todo este desarrollo de la agenda. Quiero dar paso a Germán Rueda, viceministro de Transformación Digital del Ministerio de Tecnologías de la Información y las Comunicaciones. entidad que lidera el proceso de diseñar, adoptar y promover las políticas, planes, programas y proyectos que incrementen y faciliten el acceso de todos los habitantes del territorio nacional a las nuevas tecnologías y a sus beneficios. Bienvenido, viceministro.
Marcela, muy buenos días para ti. Un saludo muy especial para Marcelo, por supuesto, y a Yusuf. Good morning, good afternoon. I don't know which time zone you're on, but welcome. Y muy buenos días a todos los periodistas y a todas las personas que nos acompañan hoy día. Desde el Ministerio de Tecnologías de la Información y las Comunicaciones, de verdad que estamos muy contentos de poder estar en este conversatorio para hablar sobre la transformación digital de la industria de los medios a nivel global, con, por supuesto, el presidente de Tigo Colombia, Marcelo Cataldo, y con el experto en periodismo digital, Yusuf Omar. La transformación digital no es una opción. No lo ha sido por mucho tiempo, pero con lo que hemos vivido en la pandemia, creo que hemos evidenciado la importancia y, así no lo hayamos querido, se han acelerado los procesos de transformación digital. Esto es un hecho que está ocurriendo en todos los sectores, de tal forma que debemos entender que esto es un cambio en la cultura, en la forma de pensar, algo que nos puede llevar a ser más competitivos, a poder conectar, a poder compartir mejor información, a poder involucrar a muchísimas más personas, a ciudadanos, a diferentes entidades, a todos los actores que participamos en la sociedad para tener una mejor calidad de vida. Los medios de comunicación no están exentos de este contexto. Los cambios en las formas de consumir información han provocado que las empresas se hayan visto enfrentadas a elegir entre la adaptación a una era digital o su apego a los métodos tradicionales. Y creo que hemos visto la importancia nuevamente en esta crisis que hemos vivido por el COVID, lo importante que es lograr esta adaptación para poder continuando, por ejemplo, nosotros los servidores públicos desde el gobierno, brindar los servicios a todos los ciudadanos, a todas las compañías, a todas las empresas que necesitan. Es un trabajo muy articulado, al igual que desde el sector privado, desde sociedad civil, desde academias, de todos los actores. En el medio, en particular, en Colombia, dentro de los 10 medios con mayor número de audiencia, se ha bajado el público que los oye, que los ve a través de los diferentes medios tradicionales. Con unas cifras que nos daba el Estudio General de Medios, recolectadas entre 2010 y 2019, se pasa de 5,6 millones de lectores a 0,405. La televisión solo ha subido un 6,07%, de 15,6 millones a casi 17 millones en el segundo cuarto de 2019. Y en radio, en los últimos 5 años, la señal FM solo ha subido un 4,8% a 11 millones de personas. Y en AM se ha visto una baja de 12%. Todo esto nos lleva a entender los cambios que se están dando en los medios. En el 2020, con este confinamiento, con este aislamiento que hemos vivido, hemos podido entender que hay otros escenarios sobre cómo los colombianos, y no solamente nosotros, sino a nivel mundial, los hábitos de consumo de información se transforman. De acuerdo a cifras de la Comisión de Regulación de Comunicaciones, desde el inicio de la cuarentena, el tráfico en Internet en los hogares colombianos fue un cercano al 39%. Hace 10 años no existía WhatsApp y la conexión de Internet solo llegaba a un poco más de 4 millones de personas en Colombia. En marzo de 2020 se estima que el uso de este aplicativo nomás de WhatsApp creció en más de un 400% en comparación a su uso habitual. Tenemos también datos de Comscore que nos dicen que durante el mes de marzo de 2020 los sitios de noticias e información en Colombia registraron un incremento en páginas, el promedio en un 37%, donde los usuarios estaban viendo 6 millones de páginas diarias más en comparación con el mes anterior, es decir, febrero. Entonces, el papel del coronavirus en este crecimiento, de verdad, al comparar los meses, ha sido importante. Y cabe resaltar que entre todos estos cambios, estas tendencias que hemos visto en los hábitos de los consumidores, la mayor parte de todas estas visitas, un 85%, fue hecho a través de dispositivos móviles. Entonces, esto es algo muy importante que destacar, porque los dispositivos móviles son mucho más que celulares con los que llamamos o chateamos. Son fundamentales estos dispositivos para el día a día de millones de personas. Esto no es solamente en Colombia, sino todo el mundo. Y tanto Tigo Colombia, Marcelo, creo que todos los que estamos aquí entendemos esto muy bien. Y nosotros llevamos mucho tiempo trabajando de manera articulada, Mintic Tigo, Y en este año tenemos un impulso en el marco de la Alianza Nacional contra la Violencia hacia Niñas, Niños y Adolescentes, en donde articulamos acciones conjuntas que promueven el uso responsable y creativo de Internet entre esta población, los niños, niñas y adolescentes, entre las familias, entre los docentes, acercándolos a oportunidades que ofrecen las tecnologías y ofreciéndoles estrategias para reducir los riesgos de violencia en el entorno digital que afecten su desarrollo integral y que vulneren sus derechos. Prueba de ello es que estos dispositivos móviles nos han permitido que la relación que existía entre los medios de comunicación y la sociedad se transforme. Los ciudadanos están contando historias que les interesan en redes sociales, sin necesidad de pedirle a un medio que les esté narrando. Y estos dispositivos nos muestran, nos ponen a disposición absolutamente a todos posibilidades de transformación digital y social, y todo esto está ocurriendo todo el tiempo, incluso aquí mientras nosotros estamos conversando. Entonces, esta transformación digital ha cambiado, ¿verdad?, la manera como funciona la democracia, la hace más inclusiva, más deliberativa, y de acuerdo con Open Democracy, la inclusión democrática real ocurre cuando se entiende, no solamente en términos de ciudadanos y de volumen de participación, sino en función de los grupos de destinatarios y las políticas abordadas por estos nuevos medios de participación electrónica. Se han creado muchas innovaciones democráticas digitales dirigidas específicamente hacia los jóvenes, hacia las mujeres, hacia otros grupos vulnerables. Y esto precisamente lo sabe muy bien Yusuf Omar, que hoy nos acompaña en este espacio, pues él ha sido un líder digital que le ha apostado a empoderar a cientos de comunidades para que narren sus historias a través de dispositivos móviles. Y estas historias se convierten en información que le permiten a diferentes entidades, incluso a las gubernamentales, que nos permiten identificar esas necesidades, las opiniones, los obstáculos, todo lo que requieren los ciudadanos, y que podamos, desde los diferentes puntos de vista, plantear proyectos, plantear soluciones, plantear políticas, articular el trabajo en pro de resolver todas estas problemáticas. Entonces, la transformación de los medios de comunicación para fortalecer la industria en Colombia y para garantizar la participación ciudadana es de suprema importancia. Por ello es clave incorporar nuevas generaciones con su talento humano en la creación de contenidos digitales, entender las necesidades de los diferentes públicos, encontrar el valor diferencial en los medios de comunicación y hacer un uso estratégico precisamente de estos canales digitales. ¿Qué oportunidades de formación y transformación existen desde MINTIC? Les voy a contar solamente de un programa, porque tenemos muchísima oferta que invito a que conozcan, por cierto. Pero el programa que quiero contarles hoy es Ciudadanía Digital. Y para el espacio que tenemos hoy, ofrecemos 3 cursos que pueden ser de utilidad para las personas que les gusta trabajar o que trabajan incluso en los medios de comunicación. Uno es el principio de periodismo digital ciudadano. También tenemos otro que se llama Periodismo Ciudadano, Recursos para la Comunicación Digital. Y un tercero, Herramientas de Comunicación en Línea para Negocios. Estos cursos son gratuitos y estarán accesibles en www.ciudadanía-digital.gov.co a partir del 10 de septiembre. Entonces, invitamos a los medios de comunicación, a las empresas de la industria, que asuman este reto de la transformación, que se unan al compromiso de MINTIC en el cierre de la brecha digital y en la preparación para que todos estemos listos en esta cuarta revolución industrial que estamos viviendo. Y no solamente son estos programas, porque también tenemos el compromiso desde MINTIC para que más o menos 1 millón de colombianos en 511 municipios del país tengan acceso a Internet gratuito este mismo año, antes de que finalice el año, y esto todo gracias al proyecto Ejecutando y Conectando del Ministerio TIC. Esto es un trabajo muy fuerte que se viene haciendo en cabeza de la ministra Carmen Abudinen, por supuesto con el viceministro Iván Mantilla, y todos estamos trabajando muy fuertemente para poder lograr estos programas en el país. También les quiero contar que el Consejo Nacional de Política Económica y Social dio vía libre al proyecto de conectividad más grande de la historia del país. Vamos a instalar 10.000 centros digitales, los cuales van a tener un servicio de conectividad 24 horas al día, 7 días a la semana, de manera completamente gratuita hasta el año 2030. Esta instalación comenzará en el 2021. Vamos a estar instalándolo durante 1 año y medio, pero por primera vez vamos a llevar un proyecto de esta magnitud por todo el país. Entonces, les reitero, desde el Ministerio TIC, tenemos un compromiso muy grande, no solo con actividad, sino la transformación digital, en articularnos con el sector privado, con la academia, con la sociedad civil, para poder posicionar a Colombia como líder en la región. Nuestro país está dando grandes pasos, pero tenemos un reto de pasar un país en etapa de transición digital a ser un referente en transformación digital y competitividad en la región. Y para ello los necesitamos a todos ustedes, necesitamos a los medios de comunicación, necesitamos a la industria y que todos estemos listos para tener una Colombia más conectada. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias al señor Germán Rueda, viceministro de Transformación Digital del Ministerio de Tecnologías de la Información y las Comunicaciones por su intervención. Ahora le damos la bienvenida a Marcelo Cataldo, presidente de Tigo Colombia y reconocido experto en transformación digital, considerado uno de los 10 líderes más exitosos del país según la revista Gerente, quien nos hablará acerca de cómo las nuevas tecnologías están marcando desde ya el futuro para los medios. Adelante, Marcelo.
Bueno, Marcela, muchísimas gracias. Antes que nada, un saludo muy especial al viceministro Germán. Muchísimas gracias por su intervención, por su participación. Nada de la evolución digital de un país es posible sin el apoyo y la intervención directa del gobierno. Y creo que la ministra Karen y su equipo de trabajo, ustedes, viceministro, lo vienen haciendo muy bien, poniendo todo sobre la mesa. Así que, bueno, el apoyo de Tigo para eso y gracias por estar aquí. Yusuf, welcome. I'm not an expert as you, but I will do an intro here to all our journalist friends. So welcome and being here. Gracias acá Foros por el apoyo para este gran evento y finalmente un enorme saludo a todos los periodistas que nos acompañan para hablar un poquito de todo este desafío de la transformación en la industria de ustedes. Voy a compartir aquí mi pantalla para mostrarles una pequeña presentación. Obviamente el experto es Yusuf, pero quiero darles un poco una introducción para hablar un poquito del tema de transformación. Ya he tenido varias charlas con muchos de ustedes, pero para enfocarnos un poquito más en el negocio de la comunicación. Entonces, el futuro de los medios o los medios del futuro, ¿verdad? Que esa es la gran dicotomía que tenemos hoy en día. Y bueno, debemos empezar hablando del medio tradicional que ha influenciado nuestras vidas y que ha formado hasta parte natural de lo que nosotros vivimos. Siempre fue considerado en su momento la fuente oficial y fidedigna de lo que la realidad reflejaba. Era esperar el periódico y leer lo que ha ocurrido en la ciudad, en el país y en el mundo. A eso le ha acompañado la radio. La radio que siempre está donde nosotros vayamos, en el carro, en la casa, en la plancha, en cualquier elemento, acompañándonos. Inclusive tenía las novelas en su momento, pero informando a la gente 24/7. Y a eso se le une el tercer rey, los tres reyes de la comunicación, la televisión, que transformó realmente el esquema de comunicación del mundo. Inclusive yo recuerdo a mi papá prendiendo el partido de fútbol allá en Paraguay, al mismo tiempo leyendo el diario y al mismo tiempo escuchando la radio, tipo el primer multitasking del mundo unos cuantos años atrás. Pero esa es la realidad a la que hemos vivido. Ahora, ¿qué cosas tienen en común esos tres medios? Es que los tres medios son de una sola vía. Siempre estuvimos acostumbrados a que los medios de comunicación nos envíen una información, nos transmitan una información de forma unidireccional. Y la verdad es que si nos ponemos a pensar, la invención que hizo la revolución de esa masificación de ese contenido es lo que hemos vivido con Gutenberg. Esto es de los años del siglo XV hasta el siglo XX, con esa masificación, y esto es conocido como el paréntesis de Gutenberg. El paréntesis de Gutenberg es porque duró 500 años. ¿Por qué decimos el paréntesis de Gutenberg? Porque desde que llegó el mundo del Internet, desde que llegó el mundo de la tecnología, la digitalización, cambió todo. Nunca será lo mismo. Hoy, con la presencia de computadores, tabletas y celulares, eso ha hecho una gran revolución en este mundo de la comunicación. Y a eso se suma la disrupción digital, que muchos de ustedes me han escuchado hablar en nuestra charla de transformación digital como genérica, digamos, ¿verdad? Porque el mundo de las comunicaciones no está aislado de cómo compramos, cómo pagamos, cómo estudiamos, la realidad virtual, etcétera, etcétera. Todo esto no existía, ni siquiera digo 30 años atrás, que cuando surgió el Internet, 5 años atrás no existía. Entonces, esa gran revolución ha hecho que los medios dentro de esa disrupción digital también tengan sus desafíos. Cambió la forma en la que nos comunicamos nosotros mismos, ¿sí? Nos decimos cosas por el celular que ni siquiera hubiera sido impensado decirnos cara a cara, ¿verdad? Y la prueba más grande de eso en este siguiente slide es, a ver si alguien recuerda o me dice cuándo fue la última vez que mandó una carta, o la última vez que recibió una llamada en su línea fija que no sea de la mamá ni de la suegra, ¿sí? Porque eso no cuenta, porque siempre llaman a la línea fija. O sea, realmente el impacto y la transformación en el mundo ha sido enorme, ¿verdad? Así que, ¿por qué en los medios no? ¿Verdad? Entonces, ¿qué es lo que nos ha pasado en el mundo de los medios que ustedes lo viven en su día a día? El primero es que las audiencias han cambiado. Nuestras audiencias son extremadamente variadas, extremadamente diversas, y no solamente eso, son cambiantes muy rápidamente y muy dinámicamente. Además de eso, cambia la forma de consumir, ¿sí? Los 3 medios reyes que vimos al comienzo siguen vigentes y siguen funcionando, pero las formas de consumo han venido cambiando de una manera muy, muy importante, y eso también lo tenemos que tener en cuenta. Vamos a hablar un poquito más adelante, pero también cambian el negocio en el que están ustedes, en el mundo de la comunicación, cómo monetizamos todo ese ecosistema nuevo, todo ese cambio. Lo hablaremos un poquito más adelante. Entonces, todo eso que estamos viendo, ¿es una amenaza o es una oportunidad? ¿Cómo se ve? ¿Cómo se sienten ustedes? ¿Cómo lo ven ustedes? ¿Cómo lo perciben? Depende mucho del punto de vista, ¿verdad? Aquí tenemos ejemplos duros y difíciles de empresas que no solamente lo han percibido como amenaza, sino que terminaron sucumbiendo en este nuevo mundo, en este nuevo ecosistema. Pero por otro lado, de cada un medio de comunicación que muere, 6 nuevos nacen en este nuevo mundo. Aquí algunos ejemplos de algunas revistas lanzadas en el 2019, y decimos revistas porque son todas en digital, ¿sí? Entonces, es un gran desafío. No a todos los incumbentes o medios tradicionales le ha ido mal. El New York Times ha sabido adaptarse a este nuevo mundo, a esta nueva realidad, a esta disrupción digital. Inclusive en el 2019, por primera vez en su historia, sus ingresos del mundo digital han superado los ingresos del mundo físico, mostrando de que sí, uno se puede transformar y adaptar. Y para transformarse y adaptar, uno hoy en el mundo de hoy, y creo que Yusuf lo va a cubrir mejor, necesita un celular y un plan de datos. Valga la cuña aquí publicitaria, tenemos muy buenos planes con buenos descuentos para ustedes. Pero bueno, como les dije, Yusuf va a cubrir mucho más ese mundo de la informalidad, del celular, del mobile journalism, así que eso se lo dejo al experto. Hablemos un poquito luego de esta introducción del futuro de los medios o los medios del futuro, ¿verdad? Cuando uno habla del futuro de los medios, automáticamente viene a la cabeza el tema de 5G. Algunos de ustedes me habrán escuchado hablar de eso. El 5G es muy importante. Es una tecnología que en un futuro transformará nuestras vidas. Así que creo que 5G es algo a lo que le tenemos que prestar atención y entenderlo, sobre todo cuando pensamos, y para los que me escucharon en mi charla sobre ciudades inteligentes, es una pieza fundamental para poder hacer un mejor tratamiento de las basuras, para tener el tema de vigilancia, para poder ayudar en la autonomía de los carros, en los carros autónomos, un mejor uso de la energía eléctrica, como en la ciudad de Los Ángeles, un mejor uso del agua, como en la ciudad de Las Vegas, por el escaso recurso que tiene. Entonces 5G sí es importante y no debemos de perderlo de vista. Ahora, la realidad para ustedes, para los medios de prensa, para la comunicación, la realidad es que el 4G hoy sigue siendo el presente y todavía el futuro muy, muy cercano. Entonces, mucho se puede hacer con 4G y ahora les comparto algunas de las cosas que vemos. Entonces, hablemos un poquito de ese futuro cercano, inclusive del presente en su industria, en la industria de los medios de la comunicación. El primer punto que vemos cada vez más fuerte es cómo los medios locales, pequeños, que tienen que ver con una ciudad o con un área específica, ya se están metiendo en el mundo de las OTT. Yo tengo un amigo que vive en Miami, que tiene la suscripción a Roku, y él ya no tiene más señal de aire y no tiene cable. Simplemente dentro de Roku, dentro de una OTT, tiene todos sus medios noticiosos que son los que quiere ver. Entonces, lo que hace un medio de comunicación es buscar adaptarse a esa nueva necesidad, a esa nueva forma de consumo del usuario y se meten en el mundo de las OTT. Y eso lo vemos por Apple, por Facebook, por YouTube, cómo ya se han metido al mundo de los contenidos. Fíjense que Apple, el último en llegar a la fiesta, ya está empezando a producir muchísimo contenido para competir a Netflix, a Disney Plus, y no muy lejos van a empezar a meterse en el mundo noticioso, porque hoy están entrando al mundo del contenido de series y documentales. El siguiente paso, deportes y noticias. Entonces, para allá va el mundo de las OTT de manera firme y de manera consistente. Otro punto tampoco muy lejano es el tema de la realidad virtual. La realidad virtual es algo que hoy todavía por la tecnología, los lentes, no llega masivamente a los usuarios. Pero los medios noticiosos ya empiezan a publicitar, a contar la noticia en realidad virtual. ¿Por qué la realidad virtual es interesante? Y si está por ahí Alejandro Bravo de mi equipo, le voy a pedir que ponga en el chat el videíto de YouTube donde se ve en realidad virtual cómo uno elige el foco de la noticia, ¿sí? Porque aquí la prensa o este medio me está mostrando esta noticia del avión en una plataforma. Pero yo como espectador, está bien, quiero ver el avión, pero quiero ver la reacción de las personas que están detrás. Entonces con realidad virtual podría girar mi cámara para ver 360 grados cómo se ve la noticia, cómo veo la cara del piloto antes de subir al avión, cómo veo la cara del capitán que está allá arriba en la parte de arriba del portaaviones. Entonces, la realidad virtual es algo que viene llegando, ya hay medios que la están utilizando, entonces es otro punto cercano al futuro de ustedes en el mundo de las comunicaciones. Este que ya no es nuevo, el viceministro Germán lo mencionaba, cómo las redes sociales tienen 10 años o menos de vida en el mundo, pero la verdad que las redes sociales hoy es una fuente de información. Este fenómeno de que yo me alimento de información desde las redes sociales, me entero de lo que pasa en el mundo, en mi ciudad, en mi barrio, a través de las redes sociales, eso está pasando en el mundo a un 40% de la población. Y en Latinoamérica, que somos más del chisme, de saber rápido, de enterarnos, de todo, 50% de nosotros nos enteramos de las cosas por medio de las redes sociales. Entonces, para los medios de comunicación, para ustedes periodistas, las redes sociales no solamente son un medio de pauta, son un medio de masificación de la información muy, muy importante. Y aquí un detalle importante, el curador del contenido es el usuario. ¿Por qué? Porque un amigo me manda o publica en Facebook y yo lo veo en su Facebook. Entonces, hay una mezcla entre el ecosistema del periodista y el ecosistema mío, porque yo mismo o mi amigo, que es el que lee las noticias, me cura el contenido y me la cuenta. Otra cosa que también ya está ocurriendo es la inteligencia artificial, la robotización de las noticias. Obviamente que lo que vemos hoy, que es generado por inteligencia artificial, son noticias cortas, noticias con muchos hechos y números, que es lo que permite que un algoritmo hoy escriba. Y yo aquí mi invitación a todos los periodistas es a no tenerle miedo a este ecosistema de la automatización y robotización. ¿Por qué? Creo que es una oportunidad para el periodista de ser más estratégico, de ser más profundo en sus comentarios, en sus sentimientos, y dejar que la tecnología haga la búsqueda de los datos, los porcentajes, los números, y sobre eso curar el contenido y comentarlo de una manera mucho más humana. ¿Sí? También otra cosa que estamos viendo muy rápidamente es la personalización de las noticias. Si yo hoy pudiera estar con ustedes físicamente y preguntarles o pedirles que me muestren su celular cómo es su tapa de Amazon, todas son diferentes. A mí me gusta, no sé, el ciclismo y la natación, entonces Amazon siempre me ofrece cascos, accesorios para la bicicleta, accesorios para nadar, los lentes, etc. Sin embargo, a Marcela le gusta la decoración del hogar, entonces le empieza a ofrecer que incienso, que cuadros, que un montón de cosas. Y Amazon rápidamente te entiende y te personaliza. Eso hoy ya empieza a ocurrir. Esa foto que ustedes ven es el Canadá Winnipeg, que todos los días ofrece portadas personalizadas. Si a mí me gusta, en Paraguay es muy típico, y me recuerda mucho a mis tiempos de joven allá. En Paraguay el periódico se lee de atrás para adelante, porque somos enfermos del fútbol. Queremos saber qué pasó en el partido de ayer, qué dice el comentarista A, el comentarista B, cuál es la polémica que se genera, si el penal fue penal, si el tiro libre fue tiro libre, etcétera, etcétera. En Paraguay uno toma el periódico y comienza leyéndolo de atrás. Eso en el mundo de hoy ya se entiende de una manera diferente, y estos aplicativos como el Canadá Winnipeg lo entendió y me empieza a personalizar la noticia que es decidida por un algoritmo y por unas preferencias. Entonces me parece algo muy, muy relevante también para que ustedes lo tengan en su contexto. El otro es el desafío del periodismo comunitario, y esto tiene que ver mucho con lo que Yusuf nos va a contar. Porque hoy, la verdad, no hay más reglas para definir quién es un periodista. Muchos de ustedes se han formado en las mejores universidades, se han quemado las pestañas, como decimos en mi tierra, estudiando para obtener un título en comunicación, han hecho especializaciones, y hoy cualquiera toma un celular en la esquina de la casa y habla sobre el perro que se perdió y entrevista a la gente con mala calidad de video, con mala calidad de dicción, lo que sea, pero finalmente genera una noticia que es escuchada por alguien. Ese es un ecosistema en el cual a ustedes, los periodistas, les toca convivir cada día más, y es parte de los desafíos. Y ese desafío del periodista comunitario, del periodista local, lo conecto con el manejo de los nichos. Siempre, obviamente, hemos visto nichos en las noticias. El periodista deportivo, el periodista del mundo del entretenimiento, el periodista de tecnología, como son la mayoría de ustedes que nos acompañan hoy. Esos cortes tradicionales los hemos tenido, así como les decía el periódico de Paraguay, que yo lo leía al revés para ver primero la noticia del fútbol. Ahora, lo que está ocurriendo hoy es que los nichos son cada vez más profundos. Aquí tienen un ejemplo, una revista que habla de pájaros, con un nivel de profundidad, de análisis, que no es para todo el mundo, pero sí hay un nicho. O sea, esa hiperlocalidad que se ve en el mundo del mercadeo. Hoy el mundo del mercadeo en las redes sociales nos llegan las publicidades bien diferentes a lo que se ve en la televisión o lo que se puede ver en una publicidad externa. Entonces, eso también aplica al mundo de ustedes. Esos esos hiper nichos donde hay una oportunidad de contar una historia, de contar una noticia para un público específico. Entonces, entendiendo todos estos elementos que vimos, la realidad virtual, la hiperlocalidad, el periodista comunitario, la personalización, las redes sociales, ¿cómo vemos nosotros desde Tigo de cuáles son sus retos? El primero, el más importante y el innegable son los fake news. No hay forma de escaparnos de esto. Ya sea un fake news deliberado, un fake news manipulado, un fake news que sea deepfake. ¿Cuántos de nosotros no habrá visto el video del presidente Obama hablando muy bien de Donald Trump? Y eso es puro manipulación de video, perfiles falsos en las redes sociales, incentivando a X elementos, inclusive los memes, ¿sí? Por eso nosotros decimos que los fake news son irresponsible news. Contra eso ustedes pelean todos los días. Ustedes son curadores de contenido, ustedes verifican la realidad. Y yo por lo menos en mi día a día, cuando quiero saber si algo que están diciendo, si hay un huracán que salió, si realmente explotó el volcán o no, yo siempre voy a los medios porque son aquellos que nos enseñan, nos dicen, nos comunican, nos informan de manera responsable. Yo siempre cuento el ejemplo aquí en Fake News. Hubo un volcán en Guatemala, creo que fue el año pasado, y nosotros Tigo tiene operación en Guatemala, y automáticamente en el grupal donde estamos todos los presidentes de Tigo de Latinoamérica, le preguntamos al presidente de Tigo Guatemala cómo está, cómo va el volcán, y uno de nuestros compañeros de un país puso un video, esto me mandaron, estás bien, etcétera, y él dijo, no, ese video es de Hawái hace 10 años. Entonces, el tema de los fake news, muy pegado al tema de las redes sociales, es un enorme desafío, un enorme reto para ustedes. El segundo reto también es encontrar vuestro nicho. La verdad es que hoy querer ser como era el periódico, como era la radio, como era la televisión 20, 30 años atrás, es realmente muy difícil, inclusive para medios gigantes como New York Times, como CNN, hay que saber encontrar el nicho. Y hoy tenemos una gran ventaja, es que la data nos permite saber quién es nuestro nicho. Otro reto que ustedes tienen en el mundo de las comunicaciones es cómo posicionarse en ese ecosistema tecnológico. Como yo tengo mi noticia es buena, es fidedigna, está bien curada, tengo mi nicho. Ahora, ¿cómo lo entrego? Ese nicho, ¿cómo lo ve? ¿Lo ve en un celular? ¿Lo escucha en un podcast? ¿Quiere un video? ¿O le puedo mandar un mail? ¿O es mi página web tradicional? Entonces, no es solamente tener el nicho, entender el nicho, sino que también es poder saber apropiarse tecnológicamente para tener el vehículo al cual mi nicho quiere ver. Mi esposa, por ejemplo, que hace muchísima bicicleta estática, ella mientras está sentada en la bicicleta escucha podcast. Busca de su interés la información que le gusta, pero tiene que estar en un podcast. Entonces puede haber un periodista que hable del tema del interés de ella, pero si no lo puso en un podcast, se perdió de esta audiencia que lo que quiere es no leer, sino que escuchar mientras hace un deporte. Muy, muy importante entender el nicho, conocer el nicho y poder posicionarse en el ecosistema tecnológico correspondiente. Y el punto que también vimos de este apartado, que sería el reto más importante, porque todos tenemos que comer y vivir, ¿cierto? Es cómo monetizamos hoy en día en la industria de la comunicación. Obviamente hoy, en el mundo de hoy, ¿qué es lo que vemos? Vemos el gratis, luego vemos un modelo de suscripción en base a un extra que nosotros necesitamos. Y nosotros creemos que eso es como el mundo normal de hoy, pero ojo porque en los servicios digitales gratuitos usted no es el cliente, es el producto. Así es como las empresas del ecosistema digital hoy nos conocen y conocen su nicho. Como Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, nos dan acceso gratis. Yo tengo todo el contenido gratis, pero yo le estoy dando muchísima información que ellos usan para después darme el contenido que yo quiero y ahí incentivarme al siguiente paso. Ustedes pueden jugar, no sé, Fortnite, pero si quiero el arma más potente, si quiero vidas adicionales, ya tengo que pagar la suscripción o comprar ese producto. Entonces, muy importante entender que en el mundo digital, el gratis versus el resto no es gratis. Y ahí es donde ustedes como medio de comunicación tienen una gran oportunidad de capturar esa información de la persona que se suscribe para obtener ese servicio gratis, para poder entender realmente quién es el nicho, quién me lee, cómo me lee, si la plataforma tecnológica es la correcta. O sea, todo lo que vimos anterior del nicho y del posicionamiento tecnológico tiene mucho que ver con cuál es el modelo que queremos de monetización, ¿sí? Aquí les pongo una pequeña broma, dice, haga una break a premium para disfrutar de los sueños sin interrupciones por $8 por mes, porque todo el mundo funciona hoy de esa forma. Entonces, es más, cuando hablamos de monetización, tenemos que entender que siempre hay un conflicto en el mercado, en el libre mercado, junto con el mundo de Internet. Estos dos están en una constante lucha, pero en una constante búsqueda de encontrar un modelo de monetización que sirva para cualquier industria, Fíjense, por ejemplo, la industria de la música. Si algunos tienen mi edad y me acompañan, Napster era considerado ilegal. Así era la forma en la que la gente robaba la música y conseguía las copias de los CDs y todo. Y si se recuerdan, Napster tuvo todos sus desafíos y después vino Torrent y me acuerdo muy claramente en ese momento Metallica, que era uno de los artistas afectados por eso, demandó a todo el mundo. Eso fue una revolución. Era el mercado, la oportunidad de vender música, intentando encontrar el modelo. Después vino iTunes con la gran transformación que hizo Apple en su momento de buscar un modelo por el cual uno pueda pagar por una música. Y hoy el conflicto de la necesidad o de las ganas del mercado y la tecnología encontraron el modelo. Hoy yo me suscribo a Deezer, a Spotify, a Apple Music, pago 8 o 10 dólares mensuales y tengo acceso a 40, 50 millones de canciones. Entonces, esas alternativas de monetización se van conflictuando y van teniendo su desafío, pero finalmente el mundo digital y el mundo análogo se acomodan para llegar a un elemento como este. Entonces, para cerrar mi intervención, algunos mensajes. El primero y el más importante, lo divido en dos partes. Hay dos cosas que no van a pasar de moda. La primera, ustedes los periodistas, el comunicador social, el que cura el contenido, el que es humano, el que entiende no la parte de la data y de la inteligencia artificial, sino que entiende de la cultura, de la zona, del sentimiento. No se den a menos porque está todo este ecosistema de digitalización en el mundo. El periodista, el comunicador sigue siendo la pieza clave de todo este universo. Y el segundo, lo que no va a pasar de moda es vuestro vínculo con la audiencia. Es importante entender que hoy más que nunca, con el nicho, con todo lo que conversamos, no es más de masificar una información. Eso se hacía en los periódicos 30, 40 años atrás. Hoy no es más de diseminar una información, hoy es de canalizar las emociones de la audiencia. Es de obtener su retroalimentación en real time. Si yo soy un comunicador, y yo pongo en mi Twitter una opinión sobre una noticia, y 100 personas me comentan, 90 me comentan negativamente, y 10 me comentan positivamente. Quiere decir que la forma en la que yo opiné, la forma en la que yo curé mi contenido, no fue bien recibida por el nicho que yo tengo. Pero eso lo puedo saber real time. Entonces yo tengo que entender, ok, ese mensaje que estoy dando no es para esta audiencia, o la audiencia no me entendió y me corrijo. Entonces, los dos puntos más importantes con los que les quiero dejar, mis estimados amigos del periodismo y de las comunicaciones, es: ustedes son personas altamente relevantes, la pieza clave para que este ecosistema funcione. Y segundo, no pierdan su vínculo con la audiencia, párenle bolas a entender qué es lo que la gente entiende de lo que ustedes comunican, para poder ver si el nicho es el correcto, si el medio es el correcto y todos los puntos que hemos discutido. Y nosotros como Tigo, como empresa de telecomunicaciones, somos sus aliados, somos su herramienta, y ahí estaremos para ustedes, para que ustedes puedan desarrollar su labor, desplegando nuestras redes cada vez más lejos, llegando a los lugares más recónditos de Colombia, para que ustedes puedan comunicar, hacer llegar su voz, hacer llegar su opinión, hacer llegar su contenido. Y quiero cerrar diciéndoles algo que aplica para todas las industrias. Es un error tener miedo. Todas estas cosas que acabamos de conversar son muy abrumantes, nos llegan por todos lados. Pero un error peor es el no adaptarse, el no aprovechar oportunidades en lo digital. Y de vuelta les digo, para cerrar, agradeciéndoles este espacio para la introducción antes de tener a Yusuf, en Tigo tienen ustedes no solamente un aliado tecnológico, el cual es nuestro propósito de conectar cada vez a más colombianos, sino un aliado y un amigo para entender este mundo de la digitalización, para tener este tipo de conversaciones y poder apoyarles a ustedes en su transformación, en su cambio, en su adaptación a este futuro tecnológico. Así que los dejo para seguir con este foro. Muchísimas gracias, un fuerte abrazo a todos.
Muchas gracias, Marcelo, por su presentación. Recuerden que pueden compartir todos los momentos de este evento con el hashtag Transformación Digital Tigo y seguir el encuentro a través de las páginas de Facebook de Sala de Prensa Tigo, Foros y quienique.com. También les recuerdo que las personas que requieran acceder a la traducción simultánea, teniendo en cuenta que la intervención que viene a continuación es en inglés, seleccionen en la barra inferior de Zoom, en el icono de interpretación, el idioma en el que desean escucharla. Podrán hacerlo en español, en inglés o en el idioma original de la intervención. Las personas que están conectadas por YouTube pueden activar los subtítulos. Quiero darle paso ahora a Yusuf Omar, experto en periodismo digital, cofundador y CEO de hashtag Our Stories, una iniciativa que llega diariamente a millones de personas con historias que están cambiando el mundo. Yusuf nació en el Reino Unido y ha vivido en Australia, Sudáfrica e India. En la actualidad, viaja por todo el mundo con sus conferencias y capacitaciones sobre periodismo móvil. Fue reportero de CNN y editor de Hindustan Times. Ha ganado múltiples premios de periodismo y es orador de TED. Ha sido corresponsal extranjero con su móvil desde 2010 y cubrió la guerra civil de Siria. Yusuf, bienvenido y gracias por acompañarnos.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It was absolutely amazing to listen to the words that came up before I joined you. The Vice Minister, German, Reda, speaking about the idea that so many Colombians are now coming online. And I think it's interesting the way he addressed the economic potential of that for entrepreneurs, for filmmakers, for education. It's really quite difficult to quantify what happens when a nation comes online. But I think what I was gathering from listening to that is that the experience of Colombia is actually not too different to South Africa and many parts of the world, where for many people, for many Colombians, their first taste of the World Wide Web wasn't on a desktop or a laptop. It was on a mobile phone with 3G or 4G. Colombia skipped entire technological generations. Many people didn't experience dial-up internet or even broadband. They went straight to 3G, they went straight to 4G, and they will jump straight to 5G. I think that countries like Colombia have the incredible ability with such good leadership to skip entire technological generations. And that's really exciting. We can learn from the mistakes of other nations and we can look to improve on those. And listening to CEO Marcelo Cataldo, it was really inspirational to hear the leadership wisdom that journalists are so relevant that we shouldn't feel threatened by all of this new technology. We shouldn't feel intimidated by user-generated content, by citizens creating videos. We should see it as an opportunity to create new forms of content, to bring new communities into our network. And even all these emerging platforms, Marcelo spoke briefly about virtual reality and some of these platforms. At first, they seem so abstract and so expensive and so far away, but they're getting so much closer, so much faster. And I think that's why it's so important. The famous futurist Arthur C. Clarke once said that any significant advancement in technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I hope that some of the experiences that I will share with you today, whether it's a cat on my head or whether I am wearing butterfly wings behind me, or whether I'm suddenly got tattoos on my face, or maybe I've got the whole world floating around me. I hope some of these experiences will give you an idea that this technology is not some distant future, but it's here with us now. And the other important concept to keep in mind is Bill Gates often speaks about this idea that we often overestimate the changes that will take place in the next 2 years, but we underestimate the changes that will take place in the next 10 years. And I think we are, as a collective, as thought leaders, as change makers, as innovators, as people at the forefront of media, innovation, and technology, it's our responsibility to be tasting the future, to be experimenting with the future so that we understand it, so that we can prepare for it, because it's all taking place incredibly fast. As you heard, I have had an interesting background as a journalist. I'm going to share some of that with you now, but I'll start by saying that this morning I went onto Google and I searched, is Colombia? And I wonder what you guys think would be the first things that come up when somebody searches, is Colombia? These are the initial results, the things that people search more than anything else when it comes to Colombia. Number one, is Colombia safe? It's an unfortunate thing to be leading on the Google search results. Having said that, as you guys know, there has been a recent spate of these killings that have been taking place. And I think people are searching this at the moment. Under that, is Colombia a third world country? Again, not the best kind of thing for people to be searching on. Is Colombia a developing country? Is Colombia safe to travel to? Is Colombia a poor country? My journalism career was born out of fighting these kinds of stereotypes. I graduated in marketing and management, and then I did a postgraduate degree in journalism. I moved to South Africa, and in 2010, I wanted to understand the African continent. I'd always heard similar things to this list, that Africa is dangerous and dark and scary and full of war and disease. And I wanted to see it with my own eyes. And I started hitchhiking. I started catching rides on the side of the highway. And I ended up catching lifts for free all the way from South Africa to Syria, from Durban to Damascus, 12,000 kilometers traveling up the coast of Africa. And what I discovered was that Africa wasn't what people had described it as. It wasn't. It was full of stories of hope and aspiration and optimism. And 7 of the 10 fastest economies in the world are growing, or the percentage rise in the world. We saw lots of positive stories coming out of the continent. And I like to think, as somebody who's been to Colombia very recently in the last year, that Colombia is not these things that are described on this Google search. It's more. It's so much more. It's so full of potential. And I hope that the stories that we tell together using mobile devices, the stories that we tell using virtual reality, augmented reality, all of these technologies can help to change the narrative. I hope that at the end of this presentation, we come out with the understanding that, hey, we can leverage new technologies to change how Colombia is depicted to the world. My background, as you heard at the very beginning, I was a foreign correspondent in Syria and across much of Africa. I was working 24-hour news on television. I was that reporter, hello, coming to you live. I was also worked in the newspapers before that. I moved to India and I was at the Hindustan Times. My job was to train 750 journalists across 27 offices how to make videos with their mobile phones. We created one of the biggest mobile newsrooms in the world. From there, I got offered a job at CNN in London, and I thought that was my dream job. And I moved to London and I joined CNN, and I was working on emerging platforms like Snapchat and Instagram and doing really important work. But I had the feeling, and I saw that traditional media were missing some of the biggest stories of our time. Nobody thought that Donald Trump was going to win the 2016 US elections. Nobody thought that Brexit was going to take place in the UK. And time again, we saw that mainstream media organizations were missing the major stories. And one of the reasons for that, I believe, is because they were out of touch. They were out of touch with real people and real stories. They didn't really understand what was going on anymore. Too busy talking to polls and pundits and experts and commentators, and not listening to the people on the ground anymore. And the same goes when we look at newsrooms around the world. And one of the problems we find with newsrooms is that the average journalist in a newsroom is far more wealthy, more educated, more elite than the average person that they are reporting for or reporting on. Many of us are trying to do stories about public transport, but can't remember the last time we went on a bus or a train. We are trying to do stories about inequality, but we're in the 1% that are the most privileged. And I think for that reason is one of the critical reasons why traditional media didn't see the big stories coming up. They didn't think Trump was going to win because they were listening to the East and the West Coast of America. They weren't listening to the center. We didn't think Brexit was going to happen because most of the media was centered around London, and we weren't listening to the communities around the UK that had different feelings about migration. And I think it's the same when I visited Colombia, a sense that the media circle is still very much centered around Bogota. The journalists that I was hanging out with were hanging out at these really expensive bars and restaurants and cafes, which is fine, it's cool. But how do we understand what's happening in Cucuta? How do we tap into the stories on the ground that matter most? We then launched #OurStories in 2017. And what my co-founder and I did, Samaya Omar and I, is we traveled around the world and we trained communities how to tell stories with phones. There was no shortcuts. We went from country to country. We lived out of a suitcase, virtually and physically living in the cloud. And we trained communities how to tell their own stories with mobile phones. And we curated, we collected that footage and we published shows. And that's kind of been our journey. And of course, the shows that we publish are verified and fact-checked by journalists. This is where you can find us on Instagram, and we have a relatively small audience on Instagram. Most of our work happens on Snapchat. Snapchat is an investor in our company. It's where we derive a lot of our revenue streams from ad revenue, and it's where we spend a lot of our time. But if you want to get in touch with me, this is where you can. This is a little bit of a backstory as to how we started this journey.
My name is Yusuf Omar, and I'm a mobile journalist. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent in Syria, and they said I was too young. I wanted to tell stories across Africa, and they said it was too dangerous. I wanted to start with local journalism. They said,
So a few things have happened since that video was created. One, I don't have blonde hair anymore. And two, we've really grown as an organization. Back 2 years ago, we were just a team of my co-founder and I, and today we are 17 people across 4 continents, and we reached over 1 billion views last year. So we've really been able to show that this works. And as you saw in that video, not everybody believes this idea, right? We had an editor of the BBC, Nick Robinson, who said, selfie journalism isn't journalism. Selfie journalism isn't news. I would die than do what you do. And I'm sure in many bosses, many newsroom editors that you will meet have these archaic views. But fortunately, I mean, having just listened to Marcelo, I see that you guys have leadership that are optimistic about technology, that are embracing new ideas. And that's exactly why we are here today. So we publish videos about people positively changing the world. They are created by citizens and they're curated by journalists. And now we've trained up over 3,000 people in 140 countries. I literally traveled all over the world, and that's how I came to Colombia. And now I'm in Australia, where it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm excited to work with my partners across the world. And we use augmented reality technology to help people tell stories, just like these Tigo glasses that I'm wearing. We use that kind of technology. The stories that we've gained access to are frankly beautiful. One of my favorite of all of the 140 countries that we trained in, and I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking to a bunch of Colombians, I'll say this on record publicly, you can print it on the front page of a newspaper. Of all of the 140 countries that we went to, the most creative young people that I met were in Colombia. And they were young Venezuelan economic migrants that had come across the border into Cucuta and were now living in Colombia. And we worked with them to tell stories on phones, which they shot themselves and they edited themselves. And the stories that they told were just so much more creative and more interesting than anything I could have done. So he edited this all by himself. He shot this by himself. He came up with the script by himself. And he's just one of many young people that we met, that they told their own stories. Throughout the day, we met about 11 different young kids who each shared their reality of living on the border between Venezuela and Colombia with their phones, and just such a real and raw and relatable perspective. I'm not going to take up your time watching this video, but it's just giving you an idea of some of the potential of mobile storytelling with communities. We publish on Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. As I said, we reached over 1 billion views last year and have over 1 million subscribers. Now 60% of our audience are women. And interestingly, 70% are aged 13 to 24, 70% aged 13 to 24. A massive untapped market in countries around the world is Gen Z or Gen Z. Completely different habits in terms of news consumption, and a really interesting demographic to tap into. These are our future leaders. These are the generation that care most about diversity, climate change, equality, so many many of the social causes and environmental causes. For us, what makes us unique through this method of mobile storytelling is that we gain access to diversity of voices, really, really diverse perspectives that you wouldn't ordinarily tap into. They're not your traditional experts. It's not speaking to the president, but it's speaking to the people on the ground. We get access to creative storytelling methods, unique stories and perspectives. And I think local network and audience is very, very important, especially if you're going to start doing branded content and advertising to hyper local communities. It's really important to start building local communities. If Nike want to sell a running shoe in Bogota, they don't need a Facebook page with 10 million Colombians. They need a running page in Bogota with 200 runners. And I think in the same way, when you start doing mobile storytelling, you gain access to these hyper local audiences, which is very, very important. There's a few key content verticals that have performed incredibly well for us, and we think are big opportunities for you to explore in the digital transformation that you're going through. There's spaces that are underutilized online where people are not creating enough good quality videos. The first category for us is diversity. Diversity ranges from Black Lives Matter and sort of gender equality, LGBTQ matters, to all kinds of women's empowerment. We regard that all under diversity, and there's huge space for content generation diversity. This, for example, we trained a person to tell a story who was going through top surgery. They identified as transgender, and they were getting their breasts removed in 1 month's time. And this is that story of them being able to document their lives. And of course, the story had tons and tons of suspense, because if somebody says to you, I'm going to get my breasts cut off at the end of this episode, you're going to stick around to find out. And I think one of the key metrics that we're more and more interested in is watch time. Not just how many people watch a piece of video, which is easy, but how long they watch for, which for me is a better index of quality. And we're seeing more and more platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram are promoting and incentivizing content that has a longer watch time. So finding content that has suspense baked into it is really, really important. Another vertical that's performed really well for us is health. And health ranges from stories about HIV survivors and lupus and body positivity. And it also includes, of course, the biggest topic that unites us all right now, and that is COVID-19. And it's such a treasure trove of stories to get selfie videos from COVID-19 survivors that have gone through the virus and survived and sharing their experience. Or in this case, looking at a doctor from New York City who is on the front line of the fight while New York was at the epicenter of the virus and was documenting his experience working in that environment. And again, in this story, we see a doctor shooting selfie-style videos without any camera operator being sent out, entirely shot by the person themselves, sending us the footage. And it doesn't cost us anything. We're not paying this individual for their footage. They're simply sharing their story because they want to be heard. They think it's of value. And it's all about the instructions. It's all about really guiding somebody to tell a story. Nowadays, everybody has Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all these platforms. They have a way to distribute, but they often don't know how to tell a story. And I think that's really important, to give them the guidance of how to tell a story. The third category of content that performs really well for us is around innovation. And innovations can be people that are recycling, upcycling, coming up with innovations that are making a difference in the world. Sometimes our innovations are also pegged to entrepreneurship. And in this instance, we meet a group of teen entrepreneurs, young people under the age of 18 that are making money. Is very interesting to other young people. So we meet a young woman who is making clothing, and we meet all kinds of young entrepreneurs that are selling interesting products and creating revenue streams for themselves in an environmentally friendly way. I think innovation is a space that my generation really relate to online. We don't just want problems in society, we want people making it better. And that has been at the center of all of the journalism that we do. And it's something I would really encourage you to focus on, which is constructive journalism. Here's a problem in society, and here's somebody making it better. Solutions-based storytelling. I think if we aim for that, and it's much harder than normal reporting. Normal reporting, it's easy to say there's a fire burning. It's hard to say how we're going to fix it. If we aspire to that, I think we can change some of the headlines that center around Colombia when I search Colombia on Google and read, is it a dangerous country? Is it safe? So I now want to go through a few major themes that we can expect over the next few years, and really signpost some of the important technologies and principles that we need to adopt, I believe, as news organizations and as the media in order to be relevant and to thrive in this new world. The first that we see is that premium user-generated content is becoming episodic. So we've had a scenario for a very long time where we've had vloggers and bloggers and video filmmakers on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. But that was really quite a top tier of content creators. We're now seeing a much, much wider diaspora of people that are creating daily content around specific themes, and it's premium. It's not just handheld, shaky, random, low quality video. It's higher quality user-generated content. And that's exactly where TikTok was born. TikTok was a set of tools that enabled people to do premium quality video with their phones. And it became somewhat episodic, where people came back on a regular basis to find out what was going to happen. And I mean, if you look at BuzzFeed's Instagram today, it is 99% made up of premium quality user-generated content. It's UGC from citizens that they are curating. What I think is important to say here, though, is I don't think it's good to be in the business of curating the same footage of everyone else. If a video goes viral showing somebody catching a snake in the middle of the city center, and if you have that video and your competitor has that video, what incentive is there for the audience to go to either of your platforms? And even more so, why would somebody pay you for that experience? There's no value in my mind. It is especially no value when news organizations find a video that has already gone viral and they publish it. It's not unique. For me, premium user-generated content, episodic, the real valuable stuff is original, hard to reach, unique, stories that we won't find anywhere else. So this means that we're not scraping the surface of existing viral videos, but we're helping new videos surface to the top. We're helping new voices that otherwise would not have been heard to be heard. I think the second idea here speaks off the first, and it is that reality is the new quality. For the longest of time, media organizations have been obsessive about production values. We want everything to be 16:9 on a tripod with a microphone, and that's all fine and fair. But time and time again, we saw that the most popular videos that are relating to audiences are simply mobile phones on the ground. In fact, since 9/11, since the Twin Towers went down, some of the biggest stories of our time haven't been brought to us by big broadcast cameras. They've been brought to us by people on the ground. And especially at a time where we are losing trust, our generation, with traditional media, often feel manipulated to, lied to. Reality is the new quality. We want real, raw, unpolished experiences directly from the perspectives of people on the ground. And I think that's why the young people that we met in Cucuta that produced those videos were so relatable, because their voices were real, they were authentic, they were young. Does that mean that they are not unbiased? No, they might have opinions. And it's up to the journalists to make sense of that, to contextualize. I do think that at a time where the social media platforms are going to be the first to tell us the what happened, the where it happened, the who is involved, that will all be automated and taken care of by Twitter and Facebook long before we can get on the ground. I think that we are increasingly having to focus as journalists, as media, as creators, as filmmakers, on the why and the how, understanding the analysis and the context behind stories. I believe that the future of creation is curation, is point number 3. The future of creating content is actually curating, is collecting it. We're entering a world where everybody's connected to 4G or 5G internet. Data costs are becoming lower and lower with partners like Tigo and others. We're going to see an atmosphere where everybody is going to be creating content all the time. Andy Warhol famously spoke about everybody having their 15 minutes of fame, and that's becoming a reality. The Orwellian fear was that there would be a big brother system with cameras watching over us, but in reality, we are the ones holding the camera, and our biggest fear is that nobody's watching. So we're going to see a landscape where there are billions of videos being circulated around the world every day, and the curation or collection of that is going to be the most valuable thing. In my mind, if there is a fire taking place outside, would I trust one professional camera operator to document that fire? Or would I trust 100 citizens all documenting it with their mobile phones, and their mobile phones providing me with the date, time, location, and all of that metadata? I would trust multiple perspectives. In fact, good journalism has always been about a variety of perspectives. And we believe that hashtag our stories, that more angles means more perspectives, and more perspectives means more truth. I think within all of this, the journalist's role is fundamentally changing. We need to come to peace with the fact that, one, we will no longer be the first boots on the ground. Citizens will always be there before us, and frankly, they might do a better job of capturing what's happening. They'll be closer to the action. They might know that environment better. The role of the journalist is really going to be centered around fact-checking and verifying and making sense of it all. Amongst all this noise, which is social media, it's going to be up to the journalists to help the important and the valuable voices bubble to the top of our social media timelines. Number 5 is building storytelling communities. As I said before, it's not that interesting if you're just curating existing viral videos. To really get hard to reach amazing stories from communities that we haven't heard before, unheard voices, we need to work with communities, train them up how to tell their own stories, listen to them, and curate their stories into content. And number 6, this is a big one. For the longest of time, when we look at YouTube and even Facebook videos, they are online, yes, and the consumption habits are slightly different, but they are not too different to television. It's still a lean back experience where you're consuming often 16:9 landscape video on a screen. But now we are moving towards a stories format world. Stories format is the vertical video clickable format that we see on Snapchat and Instagram and many other platforms. And it's fundamentally different. It's clickable and interactive. The audience determines how fast they want to watch. It is a mixture of text and photos and videos and even 360 video. It's a truly dynamic experience. And Facebook have announced that by this year, the stories format will take over from the news feed and the timeline as the primary way that people consume content online. Those are those big circles you see on the top on Instagram. It's a big change. It means for the longest of time, we have been thinking about social media in terms of news feeds and timelines and scrolling, but that world is changing, and it's changing in favor of the vertical video stories format. And finally, the old maxim on traditional media, Marcelo's first slide had a bunch of newspapers on it. The old maxim on the newspapers, and this was since the days of the Vietnam War, was if it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads. Meaning that bloody front pages of newspapers, negative news, outsold positive news. Bad news did better than, and that's a survivalistic instinct, right? As humans, from the time we were hunter-gatherers, we needed critical information about dangers, like there's a lion around the corner. That's important information. So that's why we've often been attracted to negative news. But my generation have had terrorism and fear-mongering piped into our cell phones since the day we were born. We don't want to watch it. We don't want to share it. And when we look at, you look at our social media presence, it's also often a visual representation, a digital representation of who we are as individuals. So when I share a story, I'm saying I care about this topic. When I share a story about planting trees, I'm telling my audience I care about planting trees. So as point number 7, and addressing that first slide about Colombia's negative stereotypes, I think we need to focus as journalists on solutions and not just problems. Find solutions, and that takes a lot more work, but the content is a lot more interesting. People are more engaged by answers to problems as opposed to just the problems themselves. This doesn't mean fluff. This doesn't mean soft stories. It simply means looking for answers. We've been able to do really serious stories in really entertaining ways. Even in Colombia, I was in Bogota and I met this young woman who was selling bags, but these bags were made out of something quite interesting.
These bags are literally made out of money. So this says bags made with Venezuelan bills. These bags are actually made out of real money, real notes. And because the Venezuelan bill is so devalued. This gives you an idea of how bad the economy is right now.
So that was an example of a woman that was, of course, with the hyperinflation taking place in Venezuela and the money becoming nearly worthless, was creating bags out of money. Really interesting exercise. And again, for young audiences that wouldn't normally care about this kind of story, they wouldn't normally engage with a story about inflation in a foreign country, they are suddenly interested because it's about fashion and bags, and that's how you bring them in. Another story was, I was trying to tell a story of economic migrants and refugees from Venezuela. Again, my generation don't care, but what if we could frame that story around a superhero?
Out a secret. Spider-Man is a refugee, and here I just found out a secret. Spider-Man is a refugee, and here's why.
Por la situación económica, allá no salía una buena economía acá hacia Colombia. Vine a Colombia por la situación en mi país.
We're in Colombia for World Refugee Day. And walking around, you realize that everyone, from the guys selling fruit or desserts or even the street entertainers, all have one thing in common. When you start speaking to these people, you realize that they are Venezuelan refugees.
So many different stories, but told in entertaining ways is one way to get young people interested and excited about this content. So that was all of the projections that I see for 2020. And I can't project, I'm not a prophet, I can't project too far into the future, but I'm going to try and give you guys some guidance as to where I see the world going, at least over the next 2 to 3 years. 2021, I think, is very interesting. We are increasingly moving to a world where the camera is becoming the central input to technology. So for a long time, when we are thinking about technology, it's about typing on a keyboard or typing on a touchscreen. For example, when I want to search for something on Google, I type it in or I voice it. When I want to search for something on YouTube, I type it in. When I write an email, I type it out. But we are now moving to a camera-first world, especially with 5G internet. A world where millions of people, billions of people around the world, especially those that can't even read or write, will engage with the world through the camera, where we will pick up our camera and scan things to pay for them, already happening, where we could look at somebody and scan their face to add them on social media potentially, where we could look up at the sky and see what the weather is like, point our phone at the bank and see what the stock market is doing, look at a shop and see what specials are taking place in store. The camera is becoming the primary input to technology. It's the same reason why my generation prefer to share photos to communicate information rather than text. We don't take photos and videos simply as a memory or as an archive of our experience, like was done historically for weddings and birthdays. We take photos and videos to tell people where we are, what we're doing, for them to join us, for them to feel FOMO, fear of missing out. But we use images to convey important critical information as opposed to text because it's faster. So in that landscape, it's very important for media organizations to start creating augmented reality experiences. All of the things that I'm showing you on my face right now are augmented reality experiences. Even this toilet paper for COVID-19. We've been able to do some interesting stuff around augmented reality experiences. We've been able to, for example, create a augmented reality lens with World Health Organization advice. Sneeze into your elbow, wash your hands regularly, all COVID-19 advice, social distancing, effective ways of being able to communicate on people's cameras is really, really important. We've also been able to use this with the United Nations. For example, we wanted to ask a series of questions and we were able to ask, do your kids feel safe in their communities? Have you ever felt excluded? These kinds of experiences. So augmented reality is having a really big moment. And I think it's really important that all news organizations start developing augmented reality experiences as a way to increase engagement. Number two, in 2021, we're seeing games drive new engagements. We're seeing an atmosphere where somebody will watch a video or engage with the article and then potentially play a game that will help increase engagement. So for example, we've got a new show coming out soon. And in one of the episodes, I am doing a feature on a woman that trains rats to smell for landmines. It's an amazing innovation. And after you watch the episode, you can open up your camera and on the kitchen table is a rat. And you can maneuver the rat around and make it find the landmines and try and smell them out. So it's getting to a really, really, really interesting world right now where our engagement around news content can be driven by games. The third thing that I think is fascinating is that we're starting to be able to, in 2021 next year, build worlds, create new worlds in virtual reality. It's difficult for many people to experience what the atmosphere and chaos is like at the border between Venezuela and Colombia, and many people wouldn't want to go there anyway. But we could create a virtual world in real time, live, where you could go there and interact with people through virtual reality. It's a fascinating space, and I'm going to show you an example in a moment. The fourth thing that we're going to see, especially as COVID-19 hit and we've all moved to remote work, Zoom and these kinds of platforms are interesting, but they're not that innovative. We're going to see advanced online trainings, more and more tools and technologies that are enabling us to do sophisticated live video. And I think that speaks to my final point, is further live video interactions. As we approach 4G and 5G internet, we're going to see an atmosphere where young people are going to go live all the time. If you've ever watched The Truman Show, you'll get an idea of a person's life being broadcast live. And I think my generation, we invented the toilet selfie, right? Taking selfies in the toilet. We overshare everything, and we overshare because it's empowered us. We've given birth to revolutions in Egypt with our photos and videos. And in the same way, I think that live video, as data costs continue to fall, is going to make a really, really big play. And you're going to see live video taking a strong foothold in 2021. In terms of some of the augmented reality experiences, for us, we create storytelling templates. We use augmented reality to ask people questions. So for example, we could ask them, what's happening? And they can answer that question. We found that when we were sending people a list of shots on an email or a messenger, they would get confused. They have to go to their camera and they wouldn't remember what they want to say. But if we could put that information onto the camera, we could give more guidance. So I think storytelling templates are a really, really interesting way to go when thinking about augmented reality. This is kind of how it works at #OurStories. We work with a community member who has an important story to tell. We send them out an augmented reality lens to tell their story.
I want to tell a story about how my community is saving water. Hey,
And we've created a bunch of interesting augmented reality effects. We did one to fight hate crimes in the UK. It got over 350,000 plays. People used it to create videos 350,000 times. And that was sponsored by the British government. We've done work around COVID-19. As I mentioned, we've tried stuff around Black history for Black Lives Matter. And we've worked with the United Nations to create augmented reality lenses around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this is a very exciting area, social VR. In 2021, this is taking off in a big way, and it's already launching this year. Facebook's future is here, and it is called Facebook Horizon. Right now, when you think of Facebook, you think of your phone, and you think of a feed, and you like your friends' posts. That is all changing very soon. Whether you are on a virtual reality headset or interacting through your new avatar, your cartoon on your phone, Facebook's future is about live, social, virtual reality. And this is kind of what it looks like.
Beyond our world, there's another world. And it's right here, on my face. Welcome. This is Horizon. Think of me as your guide / self-appointed spokes avatar, here to show you around. You know, Horizon is filled with possibilities. You can play stuff, make stuff, fly stuff. Wow. Really love the stash, Stuart.
What up, Stuart?
Wait, I want a mustache. Horizon isn't about rules or limits or pants or people telling you not to fly an airplane while drinking your fresh ground, fair trade, French press morning coffee.
So we're moving towards a world where you're going to be able to and can already interact with people around the world in social VR. And this is happening now. We've already started experimenting with similar technology. In fact, when COVID-19 started, and it was really, really heating up in Italy in particular, we wanted to understand what it was going on there. We wanted to understand what we could learn from young Italians. So we used social VR apps and we're able to interact with them.
Many Italians were going outside, and I was like, I stay home.
In lockdown for 3 weeks here in South Africa, but in other parts of the world, they've been in lockdown for longer. So I am in a social VR, a social virtual reality world, and I'm able to engage with people from Italy who have been in lockdown for over a month. Pasta.
Ingredients you need to make pasta, also those are so hard to get.
You haven't been going to school for quite a while now.
So that gives you an idea of how social VR, and again, look past the gimmicks. Look past the idea of the sausage roll, look past all of that stuff, and think about the potential of when these products are indistinguishable from reality, where they're no longer cartoons, and the potential for us to do interesting journalism and interesting stories. And then finally, moving forward a step, as we approach 2022, I believe that wearable journalism and wearable devices between 2022 and 2030 are going to take off in an enormous way. All of these products are already being made, already being manufactured, are already being tested by various organizations. In fact, every day of my life since 2016, I've been wearing a camera on my face. I'm wearing one right now. I'm taking video of you, and there's a little flashing light. Say hello. So I believe by 2030, in 10 years' time, everybody will have a computer on their face. We will not be using our phone as our primary device. We will have all of the information that we want over here in our periphery. And by 2022, in 2 years' time, I think we're already going to start seeing some adoption of wearable devices in our daily lives. In fact, I wear Snapchat spectacles. I also have an Amazon pair that I can use to get information like the weather and order devices. And I've even got a pair of swimming goggles. And these swimming goggles are fascinating because on this side, they've got a screen and a little sensor. And the screen tells me all kinds of information while I'm swimming. In my eyes, I can see the speed that I'm traveling at, the distance, the amount of strokes that I've done, all of this information. Head-mounted display on my face like a fighter pilot. So we are already seeing this landscape take place. It's happening very, very quickly. And to be ready for this wearable journalism world, it's going to be such a big departure for us. We need to start practicing all of the building blocks to get there. The building blocks are virtual reality. The building blocks are augmented reality. If you can create virtual effects on a phone, it's easy to translate that onto a pair of glasses that then imagine the world. Some of the examples of what this could look like are very, very interesting. We see a world where you will walk around and have...
This data works within an intelligent system to provide our customers with useful information in real time.
So it'll change our experience of shopping, where you'll look at things and understand them. Here's another example of what the vision for augmented reality wearable cameras look like.
Espere mientras reinicio su dispositivo. Hoy te ves hermosa. ¿Estás estrenando zapatos?
Ya lo arreglaron. Tengo que seguir trabajando.
So really, really exciting future we're heading towards. Again, this is not a fantasy. It's a reality. It's happening right now. And it's not too soon to already start experimenting. We are already doing things in the wearable journalism space. In fact, we've got a new show that's launching in October. It's called First Person. Every episode is filmed through the eyes of extraordinary young people who are fighting to save the planet, fighting against pollution and climate change. And they capture it all with camera glasses. In fact, during COVID-19, we did another series around COVID-19 kindness. We flew pairs of camera glasses to communities around the world for free to tell stories about how they were doing acts of kindness around COVID-19. So for example, this is a Filipino baker who is giving free bread to healthcare workers, but because he wanted to maintain social distancing, he was throwing the bread out of the window and out of the balconies. And he shot this through his eyes.
I'm not very good at throwing or catching, but these people, this story of COVID-19 kindness starts with a baker.
I hope I catch it.
3. Oh, nice catch. Bags ready to go for the frontliners?
I've made roughly 13,000 pieces of parmesan.
So it's an example shot through somebody's eyes. In closing, I want to leave you with 3 important tips, or 3 important messages to remember. 1, now is the time to empower marginalized communities, those that have been ignored and haven't been given much press attention, to be heard. Empower these communities to tell their own stories with mobile phones. And us as the journalists, as the media, as the editors, need to verify and fact check and curate and assist these communities to tell their stories. 1, you will gain access to beautiful stories that nobody's ever heard before. And 2, you will diversify the pool of content that we have access to. 2, focus on engagement around the camera. For the longest time, for the last 10 years, we've been thinking about likes and comments and shares and views. Now I encourage you to think about engagement in terms of selfie videos, in terms of users creating content with their phones and sending that back to you using augmented reality technology. And 3, build for a wearable future. Build for a wearable technology future. If you were building a train line in your country today, you wouldn't build the train tracks to where people used to live yesterday, and you won't build it for where they live today. You'll build it for where they will live tomorrow. That's how we design infrastructure in cities. And it's the same with digital infrastructure and digital transformation. Design your transformation and design your innovations, not just for how people consume content today, but how they will consume content tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time.
Muchas gracias, Yusuf. Muchos conocimientos y aprendizajes para empezar a poner en práctica en nuestros medios de comunicación. Les recuerdo que pueden seguir compartiendo el desarrollo del conversatorio con el hashtag Transformación Digital Tigo. Iniciamos con las preguntas. Abrimos el espacio de preguntas y tenemos aquí la primera. Dice Lina Montenegro, de Periodismo al Día: ¿cómo hacer un periodismo digital sin caer en la monotonía de las redes sociales?
It's a fantastic question. So, one, do not bring bad television habits here. We are in a brand new landscape where you can rewrite the rules. For example, when we're creating stories with wearable cameras, nobody has done this before to any real significance. So we can reinvent the shots. We can rethink what is and isn't normal. So one, try not to bring the baggage of the past into the future in terms of the rules. Instead of rules, focus on tools. Focus on tools instead of rules. But, the core principles don't change of journalism. The fact-checking, the accuracy, the fairness, the accountability, whether we are publishing on a TikTok or a Snapchat, it's the same ethics that we have to have as if we were putting it on the front page of the newspaper or on a billboard in Bogota. The same ethics have to apply. So I think on one side, break all the rules, try new things, reinvent the game, and don't let baggage hold you back. And the other side, remember to respect the ethics of journalism. One more point I'll leave you with. When you're innovating and trying to create something new in an existing news organization, it helps to silo a particular team, to take a particular group of individuals and say, okay, these 5 or 6 people are now the innovation lab. They are not going to be pulled into other projects. They're going to report directly to this leadership, and they have the broadest creative mandate to drive innovation. So I think having a siloed group of people who can learn something and then spread that knowledge is very, very, very useful.
Ok. Lina Montenegro, Erasmo Escobar, perdón. Si bien Internet ha democratizado el acceso a la información, también ha permitido que cualquier persona se crea periodista y haga cubrimientos, manipulando los hechos, creando fake news. Desde su experiencia, ¿qué se debe hacer para combatir esta práctica?
I completely agree that while there has been incredible advantages to the democratization of storytelling, it has enabled false information and fake news. The one thing I won't agree with is I think everyone can be a reporter. Anyone, anywhere can report something when it happens, right? They can see and document and witness. Anyone can be a reporter. But I don't think everyone is a journalist. I think journalists come with a set of expectations that we will make every attempt to portray the closest version of the truth. So I think that's the differential. And I don't think there's many shortcuts. Yes, technology is getting better. Using technology, we can see the time that a video was created, the date, the location, so much information. But at the end of the day, there's no shortcut to having journalists that are going to help us verify and make sense of it all. And that's why with more and more user-generated content, more and more citizen storytellers, journalists and editors become more valuable and not less valuable.
Jairo Rincón, a diferencia de tener conocimiento en marketing digital y lo principal, tener el conocimiento en periodismo, ¿cuál sería ese smartphone que funcione para desarrollar mi trabajo como periodista móvil y la capacidad que éste debe tener? ¿Cuál sería esa app que debo usar o cuál usa usted?
That's a great question, and I don't want to I don't want to promote any one particular device or technology, but what I will say is a lot of people ask me, should I buy a microphone and a tripod and a steady camera and lighting equipment? And I think, no, the first priority is to buy the best phone that you can afford to buy, the highest quality, because you really want the best camera that you can possibly have in your pocket. For me, at the moment, I use an iPhone 11 Max. For me, that is the gold standard for me personally, for a variety of reasons. But I think any high quality Android phone as well is perfectly adequate. In terms of video editing, there is a bunch of different software that I would recommend. If you want to edit a very short and quick video, easy with music and subtitles, there's an app you can use called Quick, Quik. Super easy to use, and I'd be happy to show you how to use it. You can message me anytime and I'll give you a demonstration. If you want to create, and that works on Android and iOS, by the way. If you want to create something more advanced that has overlay and B-roll and is broadcast quality productions, for Android, I would suggest Power Director. And for iOS, I would suggest something like Luma Fusion. Again, get in touch with me, and I can give you guys personal advice depending on the specific phone that you have.
Ok, Alba Janet Pulido. Buenos días, Yusuf. En tus visitas y contacto con diversas culturas, ¿cuál iniciativa comunitaria podrías destacar en la reconstrucción y fortalecimiento del tejido social?
From all the initiatives I've done, which community initiative do I think was the most effective? Is that the question?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I think that it's different in different scenarios. I think the work that we did in Colombia was interesting, working with those young children. I think in Uganda, we did very interesting work. We worked with a group of South Sudanese refugees. I didn't even know that the war in South Sudan has killed almost as many people as the Syrian civil war. And to give those young people the opportunity to be able to share their story with mobile phones was incredibly empowering. When we went to Europe, it was really interesting to do mobile journalism training with the migrants, the refugees that are arriving on the shores. Often when we see that story in the media, we see a bunch of brown men that look like me arriving in these rubber boats and drowning in the Mediterranean. And you don't get to humanize them or relate to them or understand who they are, where they're from, and what their story is. And I think working with them and training them up to tell their stories was fascinating to hear their point of view. Of course, some of the work that I've done is with sexual abuse and rape survivors in India, where we were able to use augmented reality technology to hide their faces while telling their story. I think that was another interesting, exciting way to be able to tap into a story that's very, very difficult to tell, but in an interesting way.
Arijuna pregunta, me preocupa la confidencialidad de las personas en condición de vulnerabilidad. ¿Qué hacer para poder contar las historias mostrando rostros y nombres? Vivo en la frontera colombo-venezolana.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been some of our most interesting work, which is focused on hiding people's identities while enabling them to tell their stories. So for the longest time in terms of media, we have been blurring out faces. We have been using silhouettes, and we've been using all kinds of other devices to hide people's faces. And the problem is when you do that, you lose the humanity in them. It's difficult to relate to somebody if you can't see their face or their facial expressions. I would recommend creating augmented reality face experiences that hide their identities while still enabling them to tell their stories, so that they fully trust the process. They see it with their own eyes that you're hiding their identity, and you then are able to hide their. So to give you an as I said with the example, we were working in India with rape survivors, and we were able to give them face filters, which allowed them to hide their identities and enable them to tell their stories. But I think that there's a bunch of ways that you can do it in a more dignified way. And I would also be interested in creating face filters that represent them, so that when you hide their faces, it's actually their design that is being utilized. I think that could be very, very interesting.
Jacqueline Now pregunta, hoy es más importante la historia de la calidad del video, la historia que la calidad del video o el material. ¿Cómo hacer entender esto a las empresas?
Yeah, exactly. I think often you get these old-fashioned editors that are like, no, it must be high definition, and no, we must have a broadcast quality audio. The best best way to fight that kind of attitude is analytics, is to look at the top 10 videos that have gone viral on Facebook in the last month. And I guarantee you that 9 out of those 10 will be people's footage, citizen footage. The audience have never been more forgiving of low quality production values. That doesn't mean we shouldn't aspire to high quality production values, but I'm saying the audience don't care. The audience don't care what it was filmed on. They don't care if it was a red $10,000 camera or whether it was a $100 smartphone. All they want is real, raw, authentic content. Of course, there's a spectrum, right? When you watch Netflix, you want to watch a really, really high quality piece of content, right? You want it to look like a Hollywood movie. But I think when we're talking about journalism and news, more than anything, people want access. They want access to amazing stories. So I think that the best way to counter those beliefs in newsrooms is quite simply to show them analytics of what's done well. In my case, when I was in the newsroom and I was faced with that kind of issue and people saying, oh, is it going to be good enough quality? I created video on my phone, 16:9 landscape. I put it on television for the television station I was working for. And I only told them afterwards. I said, oh, by the way, that was filmed on a phone. And sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission.
Okay. What has been the biggest challenge in curation in #OurStories?
The biggest challenge, I think, no problem. I think the biggest challenge is platform dependency. I think when you're a small company like us, you are building social media audiences on other platforms. So we've got 1 million subscribers on Snapchat, for example. And one of our sources of revenue is ad revenue from that platform. And I think the biggest challenge is that you are building your house on somebody else's land. And that land can be taken away at any stage. And I think if you can afford to, if you're a significantly big enough media organization, it's very important to also to work with social media platforms because they have huge reach and huge amazing technology, but also hedge your bets in favor of owned and operated platforms. If you can afford to have a website that people can go to or an app or whatever it might be, and owned and operated, I think that's incredibly, puts you in a very powerful position. When I was at CNN, they invested a lot of time in CNN.com because they worried very much about being held hostage or held ransom by algorithms and platforms which they can't control. So I think that the biggest challenge for us is platform dependency.
Ok. Jorge Luis Galeano Bolaños pregunta, ¿el hecho de que las historias sean contadas por el protagonista garantiza que sean contadas correctamente? Quiero decir, sin los sesgos mediáticos que son habituales en temas como la diversidad.
Is the story, sorry, can you repeat the question?
¿La repito yo o te la repite el traductor?
Yes, please. Oh, you can translate it again.
Ok. El hecho de que las historias sean contadas por el protagonista garantiza que sean contadas correctamente. Quiero decir, sin los sesgos mediáticos que son habituales en temas como la diversidad.
No, I agree with you. I think that user-generated content, citizen content, can definitely be biased. In fact, often it is. When, for example, when we were reporting on Syria the last few years, in East Aleppo, which is a part of Syria, there were very few to zero or almost zero correspondents on the ground. And there was a young woman there by the name of Bana Al-Abed, who was 7 years old and was live streaming on Periscope with her mother's help on a regular basis. And using triangulation and using Google Maps, journalists were able to verify that she was a real girl, 7 years old, that was live streaming on a regular basis from East Aleppo while it was being bombed at a time where there were very few reporters on the ground. So, very, very valuable perspective. Was the young 7-year-old reporting from Syria neutral or unbiased? No. She didn't like the Syrian regime. She was very against Bashar al-Assad. Does that mean that her content is not of value? No, it's definitely of value. Even biased content from citizens is of value. The job is then for the journalist to contextualize who this person is and why they might be saying what they're saying. So yes, I agree with you that diverse citizen content can be biased. Often it is, but that I don't see that as a problem necessarily. I see that as the role of the journalist to identify that bias and contextualize it.
Ok. Paula Morales Pulgarín pregunta, ¿qué cambios se deben hacer desde la academia para que en el periodismo digital se refuerce la ética profesional? Esto se debe a los desafíos que enfrentamos con la transformación digital.
The challenges are only going to get more and more difficult. I mean, the fact that I can do a live stream right now and just using a computer make myself look like a woman or make myself look feminine gives you an idea of how complex the deep fakes are going to become, how easy it is becoming to manipulate information. We're reaching a degree where we will have comments made by Donald Trump and world leaders, and the average citizen will not be able to tell whether that comment is real or fake, whether that video has been manipulated. So one, I think all journalists coming into our newsroom need to go through basics. At the BBC, it doesn't matter whether you are 10 years of experience or 6 months of experience. When you walk through the doors of the BBC for a full-time job, you all go through the same journalistic training from the beginning. So maybe that's a good place to start. To say, okay, no matter who comes through our doors, no matter how much experience they have or don't have, we have to set a barometer of ethics, and we have to do a course that everybody has to enroll in so they all understand. And two, in this world where deep fakes are becoming so real, where people are being able to manipulate images like me becoming feminine with this mask and all this kind of stuff, we need to really, really beef up our technological departments in the newsroom. We need to start thinking like technologists. We need to start running hackathons. We need to start encouraging the development community, the developers, to get involved in our newsroom, because fact-checking is going to become much, much more complicated than just reading a report and seeing if the numbers add up. It's going to become a lot more technologically difficult. And I think for that reason, we need to prepare for it, because it will be a war that we are fighting, a war against false information.
José Caparroso pregunta, en todo este ecosistema de tendencias que presenta, ¿cree que todavía habrá espacio para el periodismo profundo y analítico, que sigue teniendo éxitos en medios como The Economist, Forbes y The New York Times?
It's a great, great question. Often when we see all of these social media formats and TikTok and the social VR and all that, it's very easy to think, oh, the journalism is becoming very ephemeral, short-lived, nonsensical, clickbaity, and in many respects it is. But in this world where there's so much information, people are craving depth and analysis. In fact, off the back of the 2016 elections, when people felt like there was so much fake news, the New York Times subscriptions went up, sharply up. Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, all saw a rise in their digital subscriptions. So I believe now is the perfect time to get into depth, into long form content, into more meaningful content, into more expensive content. I've spent this entire presentation talking to you guys about user-generated content and the curation of selfie videos, and I think that's very important. But I also think there's a huge opportunity on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all of these streaming services that are craving high quality 24-minute, 30-minute documentary series. And there is a bigger and bigger audience of people that are willing to pay for that content. What is important is in a world where there is so much is an overdose of content. If you are going deep and you are doing quality, you really need to differentiate yourself. Like, we're in the attention economy. When you listen to Netflix CEO speak, he doesn't think about his competition as being Facebook or Hulu or Disney. He says that their competition is sleep because they live in the attention-based ecosystem. So if somebody is sleeping, that is a competition to them watching Netflix. So in the same way, if you are interested in in-depth journalism and these longer form pieces, and I think there's an opportunity for that, you need to significantly differentiate yourself in the marketplace for somebody to be interested in that.
Eduard Arango pregunta, soy periodista y dueño del periódico La Gaceta en una región marginal de Colombia, como es el departamento del Chocó, donde hay muchos problemas sociales. ¿Cómo puedo empoderar mi medio para que se convierta en referente de las comunicaciones, ya que ahora pasé de impreso a digital?
Well, firstly, congratulations on transitioning. I think it's better to do it while you still can than when you have to. I would encourage you to think in terms of derivative content strategies. Derivative content strategies. Seeing as it sounds like you work in a relatively small newsroom with probably not enough resources to have a different person for Instagram, a different person for Facebook, different person for YouTube, different person for Snapchat. It sounds like you probably have one or two people or even one person who's having to do all of these things. So what we mean by a derivative content strategy is, how do you take one piece of content and publish it to many different derivatives? So for example, if you take this live recording of this session that we just did right now, I just spoke with the question answer about 1 hour 15. You could probably, so that's one piece of content, and you put that up on YouTube, and that gets, I don't know, 5,000 views. You then cut from the 1 hour 15, 10 5-minute videos, the best little bits, and you caption them separately around different topics. Yusuf Omar talking about augmented reality. Yusuf Omar talking about digital transformation. Yusuf Omar talking about social VR, and you publish those separately on Facebook, 5 minutes, and they get more views. You then take those and you cut them up into 1 minute and you put them on your Instagram stories. You then take those and you cut it up into 30 seconds and you put it up on Twitter. So I would encourage you to think in terms of derivative content strategies if you are transitioning. How do you create one big piece of video content and then dice it up into smaller pieces which can live on many platforms? And I think in that way, you'll be as efficient as possible. But you've got to be thinking from that first piece about what the different pieces are going to look like, the different chapters.
Ok. Hola, buenos días. ¿Cómo financias tus coberturas? ¿Algún consejo para monetizar esta práctica? Pregunta Rafael David Zulbarán de Revista Semana.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I'm fortunate enough to say that we are cash flow positive, which means that we make more money than we lose, which is a good thing for any business, especially in the media landscape. One, I am razor focused on revenue generating social media platforms. So the reason why we have 1 million subscribers on Snapchat and only, I don't know, 10 or something thousand on Instagram is because I don't make money on Instagram. The only people making money on my Instagram are Instagram. And the same for Facebook. So I would say, select the social media platforms where you can find revenue. So YouTube, there's revenue, right? There's ad revenue if you create enough videos and people watch your mid-roll or pre-roll ads. And I would focus on those platforms. Go hard in on the platforms where you think you can find revenue. So that's one, ad-based revenue. 2, explore branded content. So we work with a lot of NGOs around the world who are doing social good, and they hire us to train communities to tell stories. We curate their footage and we publish content for those NGOs. There's clearly labeled as advertorial, sponsored content, adverts, distinguished from our editorial. We've also done it with like supermarkets. There was a supermarket in Africa that was cleaning up beaches in 11 countries across Africa. They sent us footage from cell phones around Africa and we're able to create content. So 1 is ad revenue, 2 is branded content, 3, syndication and licensing. Syndication and licensing is once you've created content, how do you partner with other organizations and distribute your content? So for example, we have a show on NBC in the US on television, and they distribute our videos and they pay us for that distribution. 4 is trainings and workshops. So I think in conclusion, you have to have a diversity of revenue streams. So that if one falls away, you can rely on another.
Ok, Linda Rojas pregunta de Magazine Positivo. En los medios digitales, ¿qué herramientas de visibilidad y posicionamiento se pueden utilizar para un medio digital a través de Instagram?
No problem. I think that there's a diversity of tools for the different things that you need to do. So for example, if you are doing social discovery is how do you find amazing stories online? And I'll show you guys a couple of tools that I use. I love that this is moving from a speech into a workshop where we're dynamic, we are flowing. So for example, this is called CrowdTangle and it's owned by Facebook. And this is what we use to find stories online. What this website does is it shows you all of the various publishers in your competitive set. And it shows you how they are overperforming. So this is doing 23 times better than a normal post that Windsor Star puts on their social media platform, which is really interesting. This is doing 17 times better than what normally happens on Al Jazeera English. So this helps us work out what platforms are overperforming. We can also get more specific. I can say, show me specifically things around recycling. And nothing there. I can say US teens. And we can move our way around to different verticals and see what is overperforming, scoring high, and lets us know how our competitive set are performing. So that's CrowdTangle. Another tool that we use is called Reddit. And Reddit is often described as the front page of the internet. It's really where a lot of internet culture starts. And this is Reddit. So Reddit is made up of subreddits. If you go down here, we have all of these subreddits. These are like forums. I can, for example, go into uplifting news because my organization is all about constructive journalism and solutions. Laid off advertising executive mows lawns for seniors at no charge. So this is somebody who lost their job in marketing and are now mowing lawns. Rescue dog who lost their puppies adopts trio. Lifeboat rescue, bird chasing dog from the sea. So all constructive stories. This is Reddit. We find it very useful. We use all these subreddits, these channels to find stories. What's interesting about Reddit is people upvote and downvote. They either vote something up if they liked it or they vote it down if they don't. So those are just a few of the tools that we use to help find amazing stories. But again, get in touch with me if you want, and I can give you direct feedback as well.
Gracias, Yusuf, por contestarnos todas estas preguntas y estas inquietudes de nuestros medios colombianos y de otros países. Y gracias por estar con nosotros. A ustedes, gracias por estar acompañándonos y participando. Hemos llegado al final del conversatorio Tigo Transformación Digital en los medios de comunicación a nivel global, una iniciativa de Tigo Colombia organizado por Foros. Muchas gracias de verdad por la audiencia y por estar atentos. Feliz tarde.